Hello, this is Everett's Watercolors. Welcome to my classroom. Now today I'm going to have a video on a painting to show you how to paint the effects of light, sunlight. Now I'm going to take you from start to finish, all the way through the process. In some areas I speed up the film so it goes through quickly, but you can stop and go and look at it again. Now I'm going to show you different techniques on lifting, how to lift the color off, how to add reflections, add the proper shadows and details, especially around the focal point. And there'll also be a background, a middle ground, and a foreground area. Now before I go to the painting table, don't forget to sign up for and subscribe for my YouTube channel. And hit the bell so you'll be notified of my future paintings or future videos. And share this video with your friends. So let's go over to the painting table and get started. Hey, I've named the painting in this particular video Dawn Light on the Mill. And there's a picture of the mill that I have that I use as a reference. And then I transferred that, did a sketch on my sketch pad, and I did my design sketch. And there's my impact area, or my focal point, which I'm going to emphasize. And then I transferred that sketch to a piece of watercolor paper. And now we'll get started. Oh, this is my palette in a bottle. These are all the colors I'm going to use. They're colors right out of my palette in the spray bottles. And I start out with the first one, which is yellow lemon, yellow orange, pyro red, cobalt blue, quinacridone violet, and green number 1. And also my palette had the same colors in my palette. That's lemon yellow. I'm mixing up here a nice little puddle. And I'm using the 1/2 inch flat brush here. Then the pyro red, using it with a round brush, designer round brush. And the third color, the third primary color will be cobalt blue. And here I'm using a 3/4 inch flat brush by Silver Brush. Now to start out with, I wet the paper, get it nice and wet. So I use the dot spray bottle with water. I wet the paper nice, get it nice and saturated. And then I'm going to use the brushes, starting out with lemon yellow. Now this is the light source. The light source will be coming from the left side to the right. So start with a lighter color, yellow lemon. And down at the bottom corner on the left, there's a little green patch down there. So I'm going to put the green spray bottle with green number 1. And then I'm going to mix that with the brush. Gives me a nice little mixture of those colors of light green. You'll see that in the final painting. The next color I pick up would be pyro red. And I do the mixing on the paper. Remember, the paper is still wet, so the paint's going to mingle together, which is what I want. And then the third color I use is the cobalt blue. Now these are the background colors that will simulate the colors of light. Remember, the color spectrum goes from light to orange to red to violet and to blue. So we're simulating the colors of light here on the paper. So this is my base coat of colors, adding more water, and then I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to blend those colors together by letting them run. The red will run into the yellow to give me orange, and the red will run into the blue to give me the violet. So they're mixing naturally right now on the paper with the extra water and the paint flow. Now I can also intensify those colors. Here I'm using a little bit of orange by using the dot spray bottle with the colors, intensifying those colors there. A little bit of pyro red. So I can add color onto the painting as I go. And continue to mix and blend the paper with the paper shifting back and forth. and letting the water flow. And this will give me a nice base coat to start the painting. Get rid of all that white paper. And give it a little bit of drying time because it was soaking wet. I'm going to start in the impact area over where the impact area where the focal point where the buildings are, and I'm going to use my darkest dark into those light areas. This will be what I want to do in the focal point. I want to contrast very, very highly, and here I'm speeding up the film a little bit, so I want you to see everything I do here step by step, but I want to speed it up so it will go through a little faster. And you can always slow it down, hold it, and replay it to see the details again. But now I'm adding in the colors or the darks of the impact area. The areas that are in shadow or really dark areas. I'm adding detail. I'm using the round brush here because I'm going into the smaller areas. Now the light that hits the building now is going to cast shadows from the structure. So I'm identifying, I'm defining those structures with the dark color. And this is the darkest colors in this painting around the focal point. Okay, now I'm going to work into the background. I'm going to start with the darker colors in the background. This would be a dark blue, it would be the cobalt blue. I'm mixing a little bit of Hooker's green with that to give me a dark green off to the right top of the painting. This will be the darkest part of the background, the furthest place away from the light. And notice I'm using a 3/4 inch flat brush, and I'm using the edges and the corners in my painting strokes. You see here with a sharp edge of the flat brush, I can get those corners and those angles of the rooftop of this building. Now I'm going to speed it up a little bit here and continue putting the dark colors into the background. You notice the different brush strokes I'm using side, and also the transition now. I'm going from a darker now, I'm going closer to the light source, so I'm going to transition to lighter colors. I go from blue to violet, then I go into the orange, the reds and the oranges. As I get closer and closer to the source of light, I'm going to get lighter and lighter. Here I'm adding more and more orange, and then I go to yellow. I have a yellow deep, which is between the lemon yellow and the orange. It's called yellow deep, and that yellow deep is another transition color to add to the painting at this point. And notice the brush strokes. I'm using the flat brush, the 1/2 inch flat brush, and I'm using brush strokes to simulate the shapes of the trees, the branches. I'm turning the brush sideways using the corner stroke. I'm conscious here of the shape of the tree also, not just the color transition. So as you can see here at the edge there toward the light source, it's getting very light. Now I'm going to go back to the focal point now again. Always the focal point is going to be the center of interest, the area that you want to work the most on in detail. So I'm going to add on the shadow colors here, a little darker mixture. This is like a medium value for the side of the building away from the light. This is to start out with the shadows. Again, working on the shadow pattern, Blocking out, it's just blocking out those shadows with a darker color. I used a little bit of sienna, burnt sienna, mixed in with a little bit of yellow to give me that darker color. Now in the front of the building there, I'm getting the impact of the light source, so I'm getting a lighter color there on the front of that building. That's where the light's hitting the building. It's going to have a lighter color with a little bit of yellow in it. And there, at this point, I'm working on the foundation, which again, notice the brush strokes. I'm using the round brush, and I'm using a stroke just to show possibly brickwork or foundation structure material that exists at that point. And then there's reflections in the water. Down from the building into the water. The colors are reflecting off into the lake. There's a lake or a pond at the base of this mill where the water flows. Again, I'm working on the shadow patterns using the round brush, putting in color. Back with the flat brush, working on the reflection area that's going into the water. So I work back and forth around the impact area, different areas. You notice here the different colors I'm using. Now I'm going to go into there's a bridge on the left side in the middle ground, and here I'm adding color to the bridge work. It's like a stone structure, a stone color, light brown. So I mixed a little bit of cobalt blue and a little bit of yellow, maybe a touch of blue. Also adding a little darker areas for the shadow pattern along that structure. Now I'm slowing down a little bit here because I want you to see a working detail on the fence post. There's a fence line here in the middle ground. Get started out, and now I'm going to speed up a little bit because of the time factors. Here I'm defining the fence line in the middle ground. I'm using the designer round brush with some burnt sienna mixed with yellow. And you can see there the values get a little further away. Now that green little hill in the foreground, I'm going to add some color there. A little bit of mixture of green and burnt sienna. That's in the foreground. And in the foreground you would see the colors a little more vibrant here. The greens would show a little bit more in the foreground. Oh, the lake edge has a little definition here. I'm putting a little color along the edge of the grass, brown grass possibly. And there's a little shadow on the edge of the water. A little more detail. It's a detail in the middle ground. And you'll notice if I paint in one area, I also move to another area and add some interest there. Like for the foreground, I put a little shadow there in the foreground. Now I'm going back to the focal point. Again, if I worked on one area, I'm going to go back and compare it with a focal point, which has to be a little more definition, a little more contrast. So I'm adding a little darker shadow at the focal point. The focal point is the most important part of the painting. Now I'm mixing up a lighter color here. I'm going to move back into the front of the building again and add some detail. Remember, the focal point always has more contrast, also has more detail. And detail is shown by smaller brush strokes, more detailed marks, which shows that it's more important in that area. And your eyes will be attracted to that part of the painting. Again, replicating the form and stuff, the form and structure back in the reflection area. So here I'm putting more and more fine detail on the architectural structure of the building. Here I'm working on the shingles that are on the top of the roof to indicate that there's something up there, some material that's made out of. So you'll notice the focal point gets a lot more attention because it's the most important part of the area of the painting. Adding some more shingles to the back roof of the building. Get darker and a little more detail as we come forward in the painting to show depth. Now the water wheel, which is an important part of this particular structure, I'm putting a little more detail here to break up the little areas that carry the water. I call buckets or little water containers that move on the water wheel. Here I'm showing a little more detail here in the impact area or in the focal point. Now the background trees, again, if I work in the foreground or in the impact area or focal point, I'm also going to work in the background. Here I'm adding a little detail, not too much, but a little detail in the background. Here I'm putting in some trees, some tree shapes. It'll give a little interest in the background, but not much detail, just enough to indicate that what the object would be. So I'm using a light color, a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit of yellow to give it the colors I want. Also, I'm thinking about the source of light. I want the area to show lighter on some parts of it. The source of light will be up in that left top corner. So everything above that certain area will become much lighter than the other part. Now I'm also adding a little bit of that sunshine on the front of the building. I'm going to add some more shadows to the focal point. It needs to get darker. So I'm adding more color. I'm knocking down the light areas. I'm emphasizing the detail that will show visibly. Again, the effective light on this particular building is going to show up on the front side, and on the side away from the light it's going to be more shadows. Now there's a structure here in the middle ground. This bridge, I'm going to show there's a little opening here where the water runs through, so it's in shadow. So I'm painting a little shadow structure in the bridge where the water runs through. And I'm adding a little bit on the fence posts just to give a little shadow. And a little bit in the background. So I work on all three areas, the impact area, the foreground, and the background. Also working on reflections in the water. The same colors that are up on that particular subject are being reflected into the water. Now this area in the background, there's a little hill there, so background details, not too much detail, and it's a lot easier turning the painting around and working from this angle, it's easier to paint in a vertical position. So I turn the painting around and I'm painting that little hill just behind, just ahead of those trees. There's a little hill there, which is really the horizon line that goes across the painting. And it's not very visible, but it's enough, a hint there to show that there's a little straight line of landscape. And then adding a little detail with the brush, using the corner of the brush, the same color, just showing there's a little bit of structure going back there, as far as could be trees, could be bushes, part of the landscape. Okay, the middle ground details. That's a fence line, so here I'm putting in some of the fence railings. And the reflection in the water of the fence posts. These little details make the painting more interesting and have you something to look at as you look at the painting. Now here I do what I call a matboard check. I put a matboard down on the painting. I look at, see how the progress that's coming along. I try different colors, but I want to find out what do I need to do, add to the painting at this point. So I do a little matboard check. Now this device, what I call, it's the general pencil, charcoal white pencil, and I use it to highlight an area that's in dark. For example, this dark bridge area, it's in shadow. I'm going to mark an area. Because it's dark there, I couldn't see it with a pencil line, so I use the charcoal pencil to identify it. And then I take a brush with just a little bit of water in a dampened, moist brush, and now I do a lifting technique. So I wet that area that I marked off with the charcoal pencil, and I take a terry cloth towel. I wait approximately 10 seconds. That lets the paint moisten with the water. Then I blot it, and then I wipe it. I wipe as hard as I need. Now that shows a little highlight there of the light shining on that little edge of that bridge, and the rest is in shadow. Now here I'm going to go ahead and continue lifting here in this part of the background where the dark colors are. I'm marking off those areas of tree trunks and so forth and branches with the charcoal pencil. Then I use a moistened brush with water. This is a round brush. I'm going to wait 10 seconds. I'm going to blot and I'm going to rub. That's the lifting technique procedure. You can see here I continue lifting even in the others lighter areas. I'm still going to do some lifting because I want the painting to have continuity from left to right, so there are branches showing in all parts of the painting. Branches on the left, branches showing in the middle, and branches and trunks showing on the right hand side. That makes a good continuity factor. Now I'm going to go in with color this just like that, a darker color in the background. For example, here is the reds and oranges. I'm going to put red and orange behind those tree trunks to make them pop out, make them show. Now as I move to the right into the darker areas, I'm going to start picking up a more violet color next to the reds, defining some of those branches and trunks of those trees in the background. So I'm staying with the same colors that I put down. If I have violet in the background, I'm going to use violet to darken that particular area. If I mixed it with another color, it would become very dull and very bland. So I want to keep those colors bright and fresh. Now I'm working more into the bluer area, so I'm picking up more blue paint at this time. And this is that transition of color I started out in the beginning with. This is darkening those transition colors from the source of light all the way to the dark shadows. Now my darkest area off on the right side corner, this is where I add in a little bit of the darker blue at the top. Then I'll move down and add in the dark areas along the trunks and branches as I come down. Now if you look across the pane, you'll see the continuity of each area has an indication of tree trunks. I'm going back to the focal point again. Here I'm putting some highlights using lighter colors. This is the color of the light, yellows, so I'm putting little spots of yellow to show that the light's hitting those areas. Again, re-emphasizing the effect of light on the building. Now I'm also going to, because I put more lights in, I'm also going to put more darks because I want the lights to become even more evident. So I'm adding more dark shadows around the focal point. Continue adding color, continue adding more paint on that particular area. And there is some color, a little bit of color here showing here and there, so I add that in from the reflection of light hitting that area. There's also shadows along in the little foreground. I got shadows along in the middle ground. So I'm painting in shadows now, adding a little more color into the middle ground area to emphasize the shadows. Okay, back in the background. If I do foreground, I've got to do middle ground. I also have to do background. So I'm working a little bit more on the shadow, a little bit more darker color in the background. Could be shadows from the trees, from the vegetation. Now the liner brush is a special brush, but here I'm mixing darker color. I'm going to add a little bit more finer detail in the backgrounds. Here I'm going to define those trunks a little better, showing some of the shadow sides of the background trunks of those trees. Again, a little more interest, a little more detail, not much, but just enough to show, make sure I have a different size, a different length. This is a design factor, making sure that things are different, a variety of shapes and sizes. Again, looking at continuity across the painting. Okay, one more time. I'm going to go back into the focal point or into the area there and darken in some of those shadows. So layering watercolor on top, once it's dry, layering another color just makes it darker. This will make those light areas in the focal point more evident, more defined, more detail. It will also show the effect of the sunlight hitting that particular building and where the shadows fall. Add a little bit more background shape, a little more darker shape here and there. A minimal little touch up in the background. Here I'm using the round brush with a sharp point. Now this is the final Matboard check to see if there's anything else I want to adjust. And I really like what's happened here so far, so I think we're just about ready to call this a finished painting. And there's a good print. There's a good print of what the painting looks like. Dawn light on the mill. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel and select the bell to be notified of any future videos, and share them with your friends. Bye for now.